Today's lesson is called Trump Wages War Against Social Media. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff.
My name is Roger, and today we're going to talk about President Trump of the USA, and he's having some kind of war or war of words or whatever against social media in the United States. And of course, social media refers to places where people exchange information like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And I guess he's had some trouble with one of them. He doesn't like what they're doing, so he's mad about it, and he's going to do something, and heads are going to roll.
This is a total travesty. How do you wage war against your own companies and your own people? I'm not a fan of this at all. And by the way, Trump wasn't censored at first by Twitter. They didn't take down some of his tweets or any of his tweets, some of which are extremely offensive. All they did was add something to his tweet, saying there might be something inaccurate in his statement. Here, you can check the facts. And they had a link that they appended to his tweet. They didn't censor it. They didn't delete it. No. His freedom of speech was not infringed upon. They just suggested that people might want to do a little bit more research based on what was in this tweet, okay? Because, let's face it, not everything that Donald Trump says or tweets is actually factually correct. But for some reason or another, Trump really went wild or berserk about this, and he said that he was going to wage war against social media. So he's going to use social media, but when they kind of fight back against some of his inaccuracies and something like that, he's going to wage war on them. Wow, what a double standard that is. Anyways, folks, that's enough for me and my political opinions. Let's go ahead and get started on today's lesson. We'll do so right after this.
Trump wages war against social media. In May, Donald Trump signed an executive order that aimed to limit the legal protections enjoyed by social media companies for more than 2 decades. The order came after a war of words between the president and his preferred communication channel, Twitter.
大家好，标题中我们看到片语 wage a war against or with or on 加名词，其中的 a 可以省略，表示向点点点宣战，对点点点开战。例如 The country waged a war against its enemy for 10 long years. 这个国家对敌国的战争已经进行10年之久了。或是 In the past, England waged war on France many times, but the two countries are now allies. 在过去，英国多次向法国宣战，但是如今两国是盟友。再来，我们看到形容词 executive 指行政的、执行的、决策的。例如 Tom works for the executive branch of the government. Tom 在政府的行政部门工作。或是Duncan made an executive decision to switch production to another factory. Duncan 做了一项决策，把生产转移到另一间工厂。另外，这个字也可以当名词，指执行者、主管人员，像是 The final decisions about the new sales plan will be made by the company's top executive. 关于新的行销计划，最终会交由公司的高阶主管做决定。
Okay, so let's talk about the title. First of all, to wage war against somebody means you basically have a war against somebody. It could be a real war, like maybe Japan will wage war against China like they did back in World War II or whatever. Or China will wage war against the United States. Who knows? But in any case here, we're not talking about shooting and killing and bombing people per se. We're talking about actually getting mad at somebody and trying to fight it out in newspapers, online, and stuff like that. I don't think anybody's going to actually get killed or no blood is going to be spilled, but still it's going to be a big fight and somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose.
Anyways, in May, Donald Trump signed an executive order that aimed to limit the legal protections enjoyed by social media companies for more than 2 decades. So Here are the shots. This is the opening salvo in this particular war. Trump said he was going to do something, and then he did. He signed an executive order.
An executive order. Usually when we see the word executive, it refers to the President of the United States because there are three branches to the American government. There's the legislative, the judicial, and the executive. So the executive does refer to the President. The judicial refers to the Supreme Court. The legislative refers to Congress, the Senate, the House of Representatives. So this is an order from the president, an executive order, and its goal is to limit the legal protections enjoyed by social media companies. And they have enjoyed those legal protections for more than 2 decades. So he said, well, you guys have had a free ride for 20 years. Well, now I'm going to limit those legal protections. In other words, if somebody sues you or if somebody wants to get some money from you for saying something wrong, hey, it's going to be harder for you to say, hey, we're immune from that. We don't have to pay any fines at all. Now you're going to have to.
Now, the order came, it says next, after a war of words between the president and his preferred communication channel, Twitter. President Trump there, he loves his Twitter. He tweets all the time. He is a prolific tweeter. He uses Twitter all the time. Now, does he always give people useful information over Twitter? No. Usually he's angry about something, ranting about something. Who knows? And very often what he says either makes no sense at all or is just not factual. Now, the moment that Twitter called him out on this, he lost it, okay? He blew his top and said, I'm going to wage war against you. But again, this is very strange. Twitter has given Donald Trump so much, and they didn't even delete any of his tweets or censor any of his tweets. All they said was, okay, this tweet contains something that might not be accurate factually. Click this link to get the facts. That's all they did, but this was one step too far, according to Donald Trump there. Oh my gosh, I'm going to wage war on them now, and this just doesn't make sense. Twitter is still his preferred channel of communication.
Communication, how we convey information from one person to another, or from a group of people to another group of people. Communication, okay? That was actually my major in college, communication studies with broadcast and film production. But in this particular case, this is how he communicates to the public. He posts tweets on Twitter. So here, he still needs to go onto Twitter to send messages to his voters so that he can get reelected and stuff like that. So that's his preferred communication channel. Other people may prefer Facebook or Instagram or whatever, but he prefers Twitter.
All right, folks, it's time for us to take a break, but don't go away. We'll be back soon.
Although Trump has long relied on Twitter to speak directly to the American public, the relationship between the president and the social media company turned sour when Twitter posted a fact-checking warning on one of Trump's tweets. This was followed a few days later by another presidential tweet being completely hidden by a notice stating that it violated Twitter's policies regarding violent content. Trump's executive order is viewed by many as a retaliatory move. The current law states that social media companies are platforms rather than publishers. Therefore, they cannot be taken to court over content that appears on their sites.
第二部分我们看到一个单字 presidential 这个字是形容词，指总统的。举例来说 Taiwan's presidential office building is located in Taipei. 台湾的总统府位于台北。再来我们看到动词 violate 指违反、违背、侵犯。例如 If you violate traffic laws, you will end up paying a fine. 如果你违反交通规则，你会被处以罚金。或是Paul violated his girlfriend's privacy by reading her mail without asking. Paul 未经询问就看他女友的信件，侵犯了他的隐私。另外，补充这个字的名词 violation, V-I-O-L-A-T-I-O-N, violation 指违反、妨害。举例来说 This car is in clear violation of traffic rules. 这部车明显违反交通规则。接下来我们看到单字 retaliatory， 这个字是形容词，指报复性的、回击的。我们可以说 Many bears will engage in retaliatory attacks if you harm their cubs. 许多母熊会因为小熊受到伤害而展开报复性攻击。另外，补充这个字的动词 retaliate， R-E-T-A-L-I-A-T-E， retaliate 指以点点点回敬、报复，像是The president in that country decided to retaliate by imposing fresh tariffs on different goods. 那个国家的总统决定对不同货物加征新关税作为报复。
Okay, let's talk now about the second paragraph. It begins by saying,Although Trump has long relied on Twitter to speak directly to the American public, the relationship between the president and the social media company turned sour when Twitter posted a fact-checking warning on one of Trump's tweets. Okay, so it is true that he has long relied on Twitter to speak directly to the American public. So although this is true, their relationship still turned sour when they posted this fact-checking warning. Okay, so here we've got the phrase to turn sour, which could happen to your milk if you leave it in the refrigerator too long, or if it's past its expiration date, or if you leave it out of the refrigerator, it will turn sour. You can't drink it. If you do try to drink it, it will have a really sour taste to it. So yes, something turns sour when it becomes bad. So their relationship became bad. It turned sour. They used to love each other. Now they hate each other.
There you go. This was followed a few days later by another presidential tweet being completely hidden by a notice stating that it violated Twitter's policies regarding violent content. So finally, Twitter's really acting, okay? Before, they never deleted anything or censored anything. They just flagged one of his tweets as being factually incorrect. Possibly, okay? They didn't actually come out on one side or the other. They just said that something in this tweet might be factually incorrect, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that, and I believe that there were inaccuracies in that statement, but then, boom, Twitter did fight back. So after he criticized Twitter and signed this executive order, he went on Twitter again. So he's going to continue using this platform that he's criticizing, but this was too much for Twitter. They fought back, okay? So there was another presidential tweet, and yes, they apparently, okay, did something to hide it completely. And what did they do? They put a notice up stating that this particular tweet from the president violated Twitter's policies regarding violent content.
Well, you got to be careful there, but if you violate something, that means you go against the law. So they have policies there about violent content. If you post something on there saying that you're going to kill somebody or you're going to stab them or make them suffer or something like that, they say, nope, you can't do that. We have this policy about not allowing tweets that extol or promote violence. So yes, it violated, it was against their policies in concern or concerning regarding violent content. Content, of course, is 내용 in Chinese, so yes, indeed. Basically, it's saying that having to do with violent content, you just can't do that. You can't post it there. We will censor it. We will remove it.
All right. Trump's executive order is viewed by many as a retaliatory move. By the way, retaliatory, that would be the adjective. It comes from the verb to retaliate. When you retaliate, you fight back. You're trying to get back at someone. You're trying to take revenge on them.
That happens sometimes in love and war. You try to get back. You try to retaliate. So they think it's retaliatory. He's just mad at Twitter and he's trying to get back at them. And the current law states that social media companies are platforms rather than publishers. Therefore, they cannot be taken to court over content that appears on their sites. So this is kind of a legal definition here. What is a platform and what is a publisher? A publisher prints newspapers and magazines Twitter is more of a platform, something online.
Now, apparently, you can't take Twitter to court based on something that Trump, let's say, said in a tweet. Whereas if something shows up in the New York Times, well, if that turns out to be not factual or something like that, maybe you can take the New York Times to court for that because they're responsible for the content that they publish.
Yeah, basically, Twitter's not saying those things. People who use Twitter are saying those things. There seems to be a difference. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part. Let's move on now to the third part and listen first.
Twitter responded to the executive order by stating that the order would threaten the future of online speech and internet freedoms. Nevertheless, some people welcomed the idea, pointing out that companies such as Twitter and Facebook should be held responsible for their content in the same way that the mainstream media is.
最后第三部分我们看到形容词 mainstream 表示主流的，例如The novel was changed when it was adapted into a movie for mainstream audiences. 那部小说改编成电影时做了修改以迎合主流观众。另外，这个字也可以是名词，意思是主流。举例来说 Having a computer on every desk is the mainstream in today's offices. 现今的办公室里，每张桌子上摆一台电脑是主流。
Okay, yay, Twitter. They're fighting back. I like this, and they're not finished either. Next, we learn that Twitter responded to the executive order by stating that the order would threaten the future of online speech and internet freedoms, and I will associate myself with this particular comment. I do believe that this executive order will be bad for the future of online speech and internet freedom as well. Nevertheless, though, some people welcomed the idea, pointing out that companies such as Twitter and Facebook should be held responsible for their content in the same way that the mainstream media is.
Right, they pointed this out. They emphasized this. They said, yes, these places can't get off scot-free. They still need to be responsible for their content. So indeed, that might be the case in the future, and it might have some repercussions, or it might have some results or influence on the future of freedom of speech. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文一开始写到，川普在5月签署一项行政命令，目的是要限制社群媒体公司所享有超过20年的法律保护权。那这篇课文它是用到aim to 加原形动词。那我们来看 aim 这个字当动词呢，它有打算啊、企图、计划的意思。我们可以用 aim to 加原形动词，或者是 aim for 加名词来表达致力于做什么，打算要怎么样，以什么什么为目标。好，那我们来造2个例句。 Derek aims to lose 20 pounds. Derek 打算要减重，减掉20磅。 Our team aims for 3 wins in a row. 就是说我们这一队志在拿下3连胜。好，另外那么 aim 当名词的时候，它表示目标、目的。我们其实可以用 take aim at something 来表达瞄准某事物，或者是以什么什么为目标、目的。举例来说 She took aim at setting a record. 她以创下纪录为目标。好，那么川普长期以来都有使用推特，不过在推特对川普的一则推文发出事实查核的警告之后，他们之间的关系就恶化了。文中是用到 sour 这个字， sour 本来是形容味道是酸的，它也可以指食物是变坏的、变质的。那么在这边 sour 它是形容像是关系或是状况等等它变糟了，常常搭配的连缀动词是 turn 或者是 go。 turn sour 或者是 go sour 就表示恶化 变坏变质。例如 Their relationship has turned sour， 他们的关系已经生变转为恶化。那另外补充一个片语 A sour note， 原本是指这个演奏的时候因为走音而破坏整首音乐的美感，让这个乐曲不流畅的音符，这个 note 在这边是音符的意思。那么 a sour note 就是引申用来指令人不快的事。And on a sour note 就可以表达不欢而散。好，那么同样在课文的第二部分有一句写到说，川普行政命令呢被许多人视为是报复性行动。那句子里面呢，它是用 view 来表达视为、认为。那么 view A as B 就表示将 A 视为 B， 认为 A 是 B。这个动词 view 也可以换成 see、regard、think of 等等。好，那么 as 的后面我们可以接名词或形容词。举例来说 She viewed the job as the opportunity of a lifetime。 她认为这个工作是千载难逢的好机会。好，那么课文句子它是用被动语态。那我们来看看被动句型是 A 加上 be viewed as，或者是 be seen as， 或是 be regarded as， 或者是 be thought of as， 再加上 be 来表达 A 被视为 B， A 被认为是 B。 好，那么同样的我们会在 as 后面接名词或形容词。举例来说 This place is thought of as the best restaurant in the city。 这个地方被认为是城市里面最棒的餐厅。好，那么以上今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Executive. Larry works for the executive branch of the government. Communication. It is important for students to have good communication skills. Violate. Martin was fired because he violated the terms of his contract. Regarding. The school has a rule regarding the use of cell phones in class. Publisher. The publisher will put out the author's new novel early next year. Nevertheless. Betty can be difficult to work with. Nevertheless, she is one of our most talented performers. Mainstream. I don't like mainstream Hollywood movies. I prefer watching independent films.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. Do you believe that social media companies should be responsible for the content that appears on their sites? Why or why not?
This is kind of a complicated question to answer. See, I don't think that social media companies should be held responsible for their content up to a certain extent, okay? Let's say if someone wants to say something rude on Twitter or on Facebook, in America, you have the right to say those things. You have freedom of speech. But there are times when you can post things on Twitter or Facebook where you do go over the line. And I think that usually this is in terms of violent imagery and stuff like that. I don't think that you should be able to post things that are going to be extremely offensive to others as far as imagery is concerned. But as far as speech is concerned, censoring that is going to be wildly complicated, I think.
I agree, but I don't think social media companies are responsible for their content because it is a platform and people should be able to say whatever they want to say. Yeah, they probably shouldn't say violent stuff like that, but if somebody says something that supports one position, then somebody else should have the freedom to say something that is against that position. It should be an open discussion, and we shouldn't be a bunch of crybabies about this stuff.
Okay, everyone. With that, today's article is now complete. But, as always, we sure hope that you guys have enjoyed reading along with us. Anyways, I'm Jeff.
I am Roger.
See you next time.